Max, what do you think defines Sydney Airport?
Well, Sydney Airport is Australia's largest airport, and it's a multi-purpose airport. It does everything because it's been in existence for over 90 years, so it's evolved. Whereas you look at these brand new airports being built in China and India, and indeed in Turkey, they're purpose-built. Sydney Airport has grown, and so what defines it, I think, is how do you keep a largish, mid-range by world standard, largish airport modern and relevant and capable. So that's what defines it. Flexibility, I think, is the word. If you ask me to define Sydney Airport in one word, I'd say it's very flexible.
What then's the current passenger count, and how much has the passenger profile actually changed over the past couple of years? I mean, as much as anything else due to the Asian wave, what key features has the airport incorporated to address the new situation?
Well, this is an ongoing thing. I mean, we've owned Sydney Airport for 10 years now. And when we bought Sydney Airport, it was essentially a snapshot of Australian tourism from the post-war period. That is long-haul travel to and from Europe and very significant domestic travel back and forth between Sydney and Melbourne. If you look at it now, our long-haul travel profile is shifting towards Asia, South and North Asia, particularly China and India, and our travel profile from Western Europe is declining, and that's for all sorts of reasons. Our domestic travel is also changing because you're getting much more leisure travel than as aviation becomes more achievable and approachable to the range of markets. We've grown our passenger base, we've doubled it in the last 10 years, but our number of flights into the airport because of the changing technology basically haven't increased by more than 10%.
Is that because of the restricted hours the airport operates?
Partly, but it's also airline economics, that they're using bigger, quieter, more fuel-efficient aircraft. And that's giving the airlines a better performance, and it's also bringing more customers per landing into our airport.
In the last couple of years, you invested some $500 million in airport improvements. Just how was the money spent?
Well, we've invested more than that. In the 10 years that we've owned the airport, we've invested just on 2 billion Australian dollars. But the two biggest investments, which are the ones, the 500 million that you're talking about, one was to, once we took over what was the previous Ansett domestic terminal, and we have now turned that into what we call T2, which is our busiest terminal now. It's all domestic passengers and low cost. And then we completely revamped and expanded the international terminal to bring it up to speed. So the two biggest investments have really been terminal related. We haven't had to do significantly very much with regard to the runways, etc. We're building more aprons, parking space, etc. And we've also built substantial multi-storey car parking capacity. And we're now going to the next phase.
Now, I know this may be a delicate question, but is capacity going to be an issue? Do you actually think there is a need for expansion into another Sydney airport?
Well, our position's very clear. We would say that to build a second Sydney airport now would be a complete and utter waste of money. We've just presented our draft master plan for the next 5 years, but it also has a 20-year horizon. Now, we foresee over the next 20 years that Sydney Airport's passenger load will double from 37 million passengers a year to 74. And we see our aircraft landing increasing by about 27% because you're continuing this efficiency of the greater efficiency of the airlines. So we're currently only using 63% of the airport's rated capacity.
Plenty of scope for growth.
But we are heavily regulated in regard to the way in which the airport operates, and that really limits us at the moment, and I'm hoping for some relief there.
What then do you see as the greatest challenges and opportunities in the coming years? I mean, really, what keeps you awake at night, Max? What drives you, conversely, into work the following day?
Well, what keeps me awake at night is that the airport has to run every day, and I just noticed on the TV today The little byline at the bottom says heavy fog in Sydney is causing traffic chaos. So that's what worries me just at the moment. But I suppose that if you look at our risk profile, how we would define our risk profile, the biggest risk we have is regulatory risk. It's not actually operational risk, it's regulatory risk. The political framework and politicians are becoming more capricious, I find, as I get older. They don't really take a lot of advice from their advisors anymore.
Just get in the way.
They just, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And then once they announce something, then it's very hard for them to change. So that's, we have to keep educating our politicians. Fortunately, I think they're starting to realise just how important tourism is to a country like Australia. And of course, we are vital to that tourism task. So I'm hopeful that they'll be more thoughtful. The second risk, as I say, is to keep the airport relevant to the changing passenger base. Because we see the airport, because we're an origin and destination airport really rather than a hub, because Australia is very spread out, it needs to be multi-purpose, it needs to provide a menu of services to suit the entire passenger base. So we have to provide premium services for the top, the front end of the plane, but we also have to be very conscious of the growing part of the low-cost market. So I think the complexity of airports is increasing substantially, and airport professionals are becoming much more managers of very complex situations and circumstances.
So how would you harness the business opportunity?
Well, we look at each part of our business so that we look at the dealing with the airlines part, and that is I think we've got a very good model now, which is a commercially based model where we consult with the airlines, where we agree the airlines what our capital expenditure is going to be, what the airport charges are going to be over a period of years. That's working very well, if I must say so, and it's bringing the airlines and the airport closer together. You'll always have some tensions, but so I think a commercial model for that rather than a regulatory model is working very well. The changing nature of concessions, which you're very well aware of, is something which we are, again, trying to provide a menu of opportunities for the passenger base. Very clearly, as you get more passengers from the rapidly developing new markets, they're very interested in very high quality goods, luxury goods at the top end, and airports are the first face of the country that they see. So we are expanding the quality of our range to suit the changing passenger profile. But secondly, at the other end, many low-cost passengers in domestic tourism, they will use our commercial facilities, and particularly our food and beverage, because they get a much better choice than they do on the aircraft, naturally enough. So you've got to really sequence a whole range of offerings, but in a way which is holistic, and so that the whole airport looks to be providing a quality service.
It's also a bit of an urban myth, isn't it, the fact that low-cost passengers spend less. They don't.
Oh, absolutely. This is why we're not really in favour of building low-cost terminals as such, because we think that low-cost passengers, they want a cheap airfare, but they don't necessarily want the lowest cost passenger experience. They want to be able to sit in a nice place and have a cup of coffee or a meal, and they don't want to be put in a shed, essentially, in my view. And of course, when we talk low-cost passengers in Australia, we're really talking largely of a leisure market. It's not a labour market, which you get in many parts of the world, where you're moving large numbers of people on a very low-cost basis to work in those markets. That's not a big feature of the Australian economy.
One last question. If there was one thing you wanted to say to the viewing audience about the predicted change in travel, according to IATA, over the next 15 years, what would it be?
That will probably be wrong, because the one thing that has shown me in the last 10 years, the amount of change, the amount of variation, the degree of chaos theory which happens from unexpected events, which impacts aviation, is enormous. So whilst it's a very capital-intensive business, it needs to be managed in a very flexible way, and we need to recognise that our stakeholders extend right from the airlines, through governments, down to the passengers. And that mix is a very volatile mix. So I suppose managing change is the biggest challenge. Everyone, I think, is trying to look forward to see how we do that. I think the aviation industry is on a very exciting cusp when you see the developments, particularly in this region, and what's been achieved. And when I go to China and I see the developments there, in India, I mean, huge new developments which we can all learn from.
Great stuff, Max. Thanks for your time.